Coming up on Theater Talks.
Do you think anybody reads any of us? I mean, really, come on.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
We're headed into the spring season on Broadway, so we want to get a sense of what's going to be a big hit and what's going to be a big flop. We have brought with us three experts who know all the ins and outs of what goes on behind the scenes on Broadway. Not as much as I do, but they often follow my columns and get my scraps and write about them in their own newspapers and magazines. We are joined tonight by Michael Musto of the Village Voice, who has yet another new book coming out, this one called
Fork on the Left, Knife in the Back. It's your life story.
And we are also joined by our good friend Jesse Green from New York Magazine, who killed Arthur Lawrence for an infamous profile, but recently wrote a very lovely piece on Larry Kramer. So you're really going for the old guard Broadway guys.
Yes, but I don't kill all of them, so whoever's next, please don't worry.
Right. And Patrick Pacheco from New York One on Stage and the Los Angeles Times, who has a movie coming out that's about the animation department at Disney during the 1980s.
That's right.
When is that released?
In late March, it'll have a feature release.
I just want to say I saw a screening of it. It's absolutely terrific.
Very
It's
good,
got all
very
the battles that went on between Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner and Peter Schneider and Roy Disney.
The late Roy Disney. God bless him.
All right, gentlemen, welcome. I said the hits and the flops. There's a nice little flop, I think, that's cooking out there called The Addams Family. Now, this is the big show of the spring season, a $15 million musical with this famous title starring Nathan Lane. But it seems to be going off the rails a bit. What are you picking up on it, Jesse?
Well, if Off the Rails includes making more money than any show that has ever played in Chicago before, then I guess we should all go so off the rails. That's what I heard. What do your sources say?
Don't believe the grosses. I saw the show. That said, there's a new director on.
Jerry Zaks.
Jerry Zaks. They're going to do some extensive rewriting. The show got very mixed reviews out of town, and we know the buzz in the industry on it is not great.
Well, it is one of the few cases where where a show is actually doing something different after an out-of-town opening that got mixed reviews. They actually seem to be making changes. This hasn't happened very much in recent years, not since Twyla Tharp redid Moving Out a number of years ago. So, but I think you have a thing in for it. So let's discount that. I don't see why it wouldn't be a hit. I mean,
I like the way you quoted Nathan Lane saying to a friend in public, the show really, nobody knows what they're doing. And Nathan Lane responded, I would never say that about the show in public. Okay, what does that say to you?
It wasn't exactly in public. He was at the Spot, the Four Seasons, and happened to be complaining about the show, and one of my spies happened to be walking by in a towel.
Are you the towel boy?
Apparently, I haven't seen it yet, but there are too many subplots, too many Addams Family people, too many
non-Addams Family people.
And then Jackie Hoffman, who's supposedly great as Granny, doesn't get a song. So they're working on it, and that's what you're supposed to do out of town and pre-book.
I wouldn't underestimate the fact that they can make the changes that are necessary in Chicago and have a big hit on their hands. It's a question of tone. It's a difficult tone to hit. And I think that's probably what they're working on, and I'm sure that's the first or major note that Jerry Zaks is giving to the writers, who are no slouches.
Why bring in Jerry Zaks, though? I mean, here's a man who has not had a hit himself in about 20 years, who I think show doctored The Kate Man. That didn't work. Who was brought on to another show, I think, that didn't go. And, you know, he was a very talented guy and had a great run back in the 80s, but it's been a long time since Jerry Zaks has had a hit.
Two words, Nathan Lane. That's why they brought him in. There's a comfort factor with a star who has a lot to say in the Addams Family.
Oh, yes.
And Jerry Zaks worked very successfully with Nathan in If Anything Happened on the Way for Him and on Guys and Dolls, both of which were hits and both of which did very well. So I think it was the comfort factor and that he was available. A lot of times when you're looking for a show doctor who's available, it's a very, very short list of seasoned musical theater directors who can turn it around under that kind of pressure.
Do you think this damages the, I know you love the fact that it sold so much in Chicago, but do you think now that Shatter, that's in trouble in my column in the Times and all this, does it begin to take a toll on the box office in New York?
No. Not even in the least. Do you think anybody reads any of us? I mean, Really, come on, it's the Addams Family. If they're interested in that, they're interested in that. If they're not, you're not. Nothing you or I say is going to change it.
Moving along to some more interesting shows, because that's the one obvious commercial one. But we've got American Idiot by Green, what are they called?
Green Day.
Green Day, Mr. Hip. This is sort of pushing the musical along to make it more appealing to young people by having rock musicians write it, Michael?
Well, we had something called Spring Awakening. We had the return of Hair. There is a real audience for young people who want to be enveloped in something kind of cool and edgy and rock and roll. This is not going to appeal to the matinee ladies who go to see Little Night Music and think that's too avant-garde.
But it's not just for those young people.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but it's clearly, first of all, it's not that somebody said, let's find a show for the young people. It's that a show was in development that may appeal to young people, but I think it also would appeal to the much larger group of ticket-buying people, middle-aged people who would like to feel a little cutting edge and a little bit younger. Yes, those matinee ladies, this is not going to be their cup of tea, but I think there's a wider audience than just 15-year-olds who, after all, can't.
The old ladies will be going to Crap's Last Tape.
Right.
Let's face it.
Yeah, well, Patrick, I mean, you're a matinee lady. Would you stay away from American Idiot?
Is it this blue hair?
Purple.
Am I wearing blue hair today? I would not stay away from American Idiot at all. I mean, it sold a humongous amount. I had never heard of Green Day. Yeah, Mr. Hip as well, Mr. Hip Blue Lady.
How about
Blue
Shirley
hair
Bassey?
lady.
Shirley
Yeah,
Bassey.
there you go. I had not heard of it. It sold a humongous amount of albums. I mean, certainly there's a brand name, and you do have the Spring Awakening, Michael Mayer, director team behind it, and it got pretty good reviews when it was at Berkeley Rep, as I recall.
Including a review in the New York Times.
By whom?
Charles Isherwood.
That's right. Charles Isherwood
so
went out
he's
and
picked
gave
that
it
as a horse to ride. Then.
Yeah. Well, that I think American Idiot is one to watch, and another one that Charles Isherwood, who doesn't seem to review in New York anymore, but runs around the country reviewing all the shows.
Why would that be?
Broadway. He's not been given a clear shot at that top job yet from Ben Brantley. But anyway, he also went to see Twyla Tharp's new musical called. What was it? It was called.
It was called Come Fly With Me. It's now called Come Fly Away. I don't what's next? Fly. The Fly.
I'm flying. It's her show that uses the songs of Frank Sinatra.
Songs made famous by Frank Sinatra.
And what's the background? Isn't this based on some dances that she's done before?
Well, she's worked with Sinatra songs for years in a ballet context, and now she apparently felt it was time to do it in a theatrical context, and all signs are that it's great.
Yeah.
And she did great with that Bob Dylan thing.
Yeah, that also had a strange punctuation in the title.
I think people that saw her other hit, Moving Out,
the Billy Joel musical,
probably come with it favorably disposed.
But I have a question.
Wanting to like it.
Are they dancing to Frank Sinatra singing, or is somebody else singing?
It's Frank Sinatra on tape,
Oh,
obviously,
all right, great.
because he's gone. But with a
listen, even when he was here, he was on tape.
He was on tape.
How would you categorize, Michael, a Twyla Tharp musical? What is she doing in the genre of musical theater?
To me, this is not a jukebox musical, which, by the way, is never going away. The last decade brought that in right after 9/11. Everybody was like, oh, Mamma Mia's not that bad. We're so depressed about 9/11. Maybe Mamma Mia will save us. I hate anyone who said that, because now we still have this genre going on. But this is a review. This is from someone who lives and breathes dance. And I think she's going to interpret it in a way that's going to be innovative, sort of the way that Billy Joel was, hopefully with better politics this time.
It's also
It's a Tharpical.
as opposed to her works that are made for the ballet stage. There is more of a obvious story. I mean, it's not as abstract as some of her pure dance work. So people will be able to say, oh, she's in love with him, he's in love with her, and there's a triangle, and there's this, and they'll feel like they got a bit of a story. But it is dance.
Yes, it is dance.
And it sounds like real comfort food.
Would you ever apply that term comfort food to Twyla Tharp?
No, but I'd apply it to Frank Sinatra. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'd apply it to Green Day.
And then there's another little musical that's kind of slipping in under the wire, $1 Million Quartet, coming from Chicago. What's that about?
It's about a famous recording session at Sun Records in 1953. I'm not sure when. That featured Elvis and Someone help me out here. Come on,
Frank Sinatra.
No. Jerry Lee Lewis.
Tallulah
Johnny
Bankhead.
Cash.
Johnny Cash.
And
Shirley
Green Day.
And Green Day.
Carl Perkins.
Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis,
And
and
Elvis.
Elvis Presley. And this is that day.
It is a
when they all got
recreation
together.
of that day, presumably made into fiction because we don't want to see them all snorting and drinking and whatever
is
else
it
they were
like
doing.
cheeky, or is it supposed to is dramatic and meaningful?
Dramatic and dark.
So we've got two dark, dramatic, meaningful musicals about the early '50s rock and roll going on Broadway at the same time.
Two.
Memphis. And
Yeah, Memphis.
West Side Story. I mean, there's hundreds.
Yeah.
That's most of what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean dramatic. I mean about that period in
that
rock
period
and roll.
of pop music.
Yes. Well, yes, it does share some similarities with Memphis, which is still running.
Now, Michael, as a real old-fashioned show queen, do you have
Next to the blue-haired
any
lady.
interest in?
I am not old-fashioned.
Do you have any interest in, a Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis recording
No.
session?
No. And I wonder why they're hedging their bets. They thought just having Elvis up there alone wasn't good enough. Throw in Carl Perkins.
Did the critics weigh in on $1 Million Quartet?
Yes,
did
they
the
liked
Times.
it.
Did the Times weigh in on?
The Tribune in Chicago liked it very much.
Chris Jones?
Chris Jones
Yeah.
liked it very much, and he thinks it's quite entertaining. And that's what I'm hearing from the people who are bringing it into New York.
Yeah, well, this is not an age of narrative. This is
Yeah,
not
good point.
a period where producers, at any rate, are trusting very much to the audience's taste for complicated stories told with involving and difficult characters.
And new music.
And new music. So, in a way, this may fit perfectly.
It's almost like they're randomly plumbing our memory banks from our baby boomer youths and just saying, oh, how about the Addams Family? How about Elvis? How about Sinatra? People respond to these things automatically. Just throw it up there. And to me, it just betrays a total lack of inspiration. But that's what Broadway's become. It's a living museum for nostalgia.
Well, not entirely. I mean, you still have Billy Elliot. You still have.
Oh, yeah.
You still have both
Billy
musicals.
Elliot?
Sure. What's the name
That was
of Billy
based on
Elliot?
an old movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know when your childhood was, but mine was not in the 2000s.
But it's still in somebody's memory bank.
Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark, the big Julie Taymor show. What's the status of that now?
It's
Supposed to be opening in the fall.
Yeah.
Is it?
I'm taking my cue from you,
Darling.
Michael.
Yes, I
What
think
do
it
you-
will.
what do you know?
I think it will open in the fall. They went through this period where it's a $50 million show. I think the most expensive musical in the history of Broadway, and they didn't bother to raise the money. Isn't that great? Putting on a show and whoops, forgot to raise the money.
Well,
so
also
they
they-
suspended the show, stopped work on the show, and it's been in this weird financial limbo for the last 3 or 4 months. But apparently, it's been put back together. And it is going to go forward. Can they overcome all this negative publicity, do you think, Patrick?
Sure.
If the show's good?
Yeah, sure. I think with that kind of a brand and people that have seen that Investors Reel say that it's extraordinary. That the
Julie
visuals
Taymor's imagination is
amazing, and how it works, how they build a web on the stage, and the climbing and the flying. All of that is spectacular. So what we've come down to, whether it's a narrative or jukebox like Jersey Boys, it still comes down to creating an event. I think that's what you've got to create on Broadway. And I think that if they can create an event that you can't see anywhere else and that gets the buzz, sure, they can overcome. Your call, Michael.
Is Spider-Man another product of the bankruptcy of the creative thinking on Broadway, do you think?
It's the bankruptcy of that particular theater. I wouldn't invest in the show right now. I mean, you're basically giving money so they can pay back the refunds of people who bought tickets for February.
That's right.
But I think it could turn around. Look at Avatar. I mean, people love the idea of something that's buzzed to be like a big folly and a gigantic disaster, and then turns around and says, wait a minute, people are going to line up for this, and it's going to turn a profit.
They got into a lot of trouble because they gave Julie Taymor, who is brilliant, a blank check to spend, and she spent.
No, they gave her a bounce check. That's what they gave her.
Is that still their policy? She can spend as much as she wants?
You know, you can't pin down someone like Julie Taymor with petty little things like the finances of the show. If you hire Julie Taymor, she's got to be allowed to range. And in her defense, they gave her a budget of $45 to $50 million. It's just it turned out that the producer didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Now they have the money. We'll see what happens. Very interesting, Jesse, plays coming from London this season. And the one that seems to be generating a lot of buzz is Enron.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a play by a young British writer named Lucy Prebble, who previous to this had, I think, only maybe one play produced and a TV series in England. That takes on the quintessential American fiscal disaster of the earlier part.
Spider-Man.
But through a very kind of British style with music and dance and rather cutting satire. All the rage in London, and being recast here with Norbert Leo Butz, the name we all love to say, in the lead as Jeffrey Skilling, if you remember from the news accounts. And the buzz is excellent.
I saw it. I saw it at the Royal Court.
And?
I loved it. I loved it. It's
What's
too
it look
long.
like? What's it feel like?
You know, I guess the thing is 3 blind mice come out singing. That's kind of like the metaphor. You've got 3 people with canes, and then...
That's the miracle worker.
Isn't that a scene in Dr. No?
So there is this surrealistic quality to it, and you gave a very good description of it. That's exactly it. It's cutting. It's satirical. And I think satire has got to be 90 minutes. You know,
So it's too long.
It
You think
runs
it's
a
too
little
long?
too long. Yeah.
Is it 2 acts?
It's 2 hours 40.
Oh no! Please, Enron, cut it.
Yeah.
It's the new orphan cycle.
It runs
And let's
fairly...
also not forget that there are British sensations that are recast, like Democracy, that end up fizzling because it didn't have the spark that it had in London.
No, this is really smart, and for such a neophyte playwright, I think it's a really fine piece of writing. It does tend to over-explain, possibly for a British audience too. I think the British audience needed to know a little bit more than necessarily that we do, and I think they can cut it. Will they be able to cut it?
You know what? I think you're overestimating the memory of Americans about anything that happened more than a week ago.
Well, you may be right. It was a good companion piece to The Power of Yes, David Hare's show at the National Theatre,
Which is
was
not
also,
coming here, but that's about the financial collapse.
Yeah, the financial collapse.
The Broadway audience dying to see plays about the financial collapse?
They are, because I think they're finally ready to process what they read about and hear about and what they're experiencing every day.
In a
That's so
dramatic-
devastating in a way that could become entertainment.
Yes, that sounds to me like one that could work.
And they don't even see the irony of paying $130 to see something about the
Or
financial collapse.
270 if they really matter.
Isn't it interesting, though, that it's the British playwrights that are addressing this financial collapse? Are there any American playwrights out there that we know of that are tackling these issues as directly and as compellingly as the British writers are?
It doesn't seem to be what happens when American writers set out to get their plays produced, that the regional theaters and the off-Broadway companies that help develop plays that may eventually go to Broadway are really looking for timely things like that. It just doesn't seem to go through our development system that way. So it's not whether American playwrights are interested in this or even writing about this, it's about what actually gets through the
Yes, can those
pipeline.
playwrights get recognized?
Whereas
Yeah.
you do that play in London first, you get the imprimatur of London, then you can bring it here, and
Yeah.
there's a little bit more feeling of safety. Whether the safety's real or not is yet to be seen.
We talk about this a lot. You get more attention as a playwright in London, in
Right.
New York, than you do from New Jersey.
Another,
They're bringing Red.
Yes, another play coming from London, Red. Do we know anything about this? It's supposed to be quite a good play about
Mark Rothko,
Mark
the
Rothko,
artist.
yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Rothko, the abstract expressionist,
Really?
and his assistant.
Who
I
committed
don't know,
suicide?
plays about
It is
painters
a
are
good
not generally very successful, but
Name one that was a hit.
Picasso at the La Panagile.
Very good.
And this one's got,
Very smart.
this one's got Alfred Molina in his return to Broadway.
Who is apparently giving an absolutely terrific performance. A couple of other things that we should touch on
The
here.
Miracle Worker with Al
No,
Breslow.
we don't. Do we care about the miracle? Does anyone care about the Miracle Worker?
Sure, it's a good pot boiler. It's great. I'm looking forward
After
to
the
it.
Wawa scene, it's really downhill. I mean,
And I do because Abigail Breslin used to live in our building.
Well,
and
there we go.
I'm really proud of her.
And Alison Pill is playing.
Yes, wonderful
the
actress.
lead role.
and
the
there was a
Anne
big
Bancroft role.
fuss about why didn't they hire actually disabled people for the roles. But, and now then people started lining up for the understudy saying, I'm slightly hard of hearing in the left ear. Can I get What is Susan doing here?
It's like,
Are you auditioning?
I'm trying to stop myself from saying something non-PC.
Is this your Helen Keller one-woman show that you're doing here?
Self-defeating the equity rules can be.
Let's hear it and we'll cut it
No, I
later.
just mean that they go crazy and say, oh, you have to have a blind actress play a blind
Right.
person.
well,
it's
in
not
the end,
understanding
they
the
have,
process.
they have an understudy for the lead who has a hearing disability of some sort. But the main,
She's like,
No.
line. Anyway.
I'll leave. You know, you called him a blue-haired lady and you called him a theater queen. I'm just waiting. All right.
Well, with that outfit, it looks like you're going to a hoedown.
Yeah, I'm going to the gay two-stepping convention.
There we go. Yeah, Promises, a revival starring Kristen Chenoweth. It strikes me that they're trying to capitalize on the whole Mad Men phenomenon, the early 60s style.
Well, and it's also one of the few shows left from the golden age that hasn't been revived. But I have high hopes for this show. I mean, it's obviously the score is terrific.
Yeah.
And Rob Ashford
directing choreography.
The show is Burt Bacharach meets Billy Wilder, and it's a show I've always wanted to see, and they never did it. And so finally something new.
They did an Encores revival, didn't they, Michael?
Yes, they did a brilliant Encores revival many years ago.
With Martin Short.
But here's the question about Kristen Chenoweth. You know, the part she's playing is very, very vulnerable. She's the Shirley MacLaine elevator operator. I think they make her secretary in the musical. But she's really got to be tender and vulnerable. She commits suicide. Have we seen Kristen Chenoweth do this before?
She tries to commit suicide.
Yes.
Yeah, let's
Just to clarify.
Let's see what Brent Brantley says in the New York Times.
She tries to commit suicide. I think it's going to be a stretch. I wouldn't necessarily cast her. It wouldn't be my first casting choice. There's a certain cutesy element to her that she's going to have to deep six to play this role.
I've seen her do stuff that with great sensitivity and deeper layers, and I don't see why she wouldn't bring that to this.
And sing "Whoever You Are, I Love You," one of the most beautiful theater songs.
Would you like to sing it
I
for
wouldn't
us
go that
now?
far.
If you want to hear me.
It'll be interesting to see how well the Neil Simon book holds up.
Yeah, well, so far, Neil Simon scripts haven't been holding up very well.
Well, you know when they
That
did.
means it'll close at 4 performances.
Likely, I'll cut this, but we remember when they did the Rob Marshall revival, Encores, which was spectacular, and then it was criticized for being too sexist, and that was the point. It was about, like Mad Men, it's about the sexist era, but.
Well, if they get the suits right, maybe people will like it.
Speaking of suits, La Cage aux Folles, Michael, we just had a flop revival.
I saw it 2 days ago. Come on. Things are really accelerating now with these revivals. And this one's on a budget.
Oh, wait a minute. There's
There are
another revival.
2 Cagelles, no sequins, just flannel shirts, a little razor stubble, and a hat.
I saw it in London.
You've seen everything.
I saw it in London. I was there for a
He
while.
travels more than Isher would.
A lot relies on Douglas Hodge. Believe
Who's
me.
playing
The
I
drag
didn't
queen.
see
the drag
Douglas,
queen?
Yeah, I didn't see Douglas Hodge in it. I saw John Barrowman. I wouldn't bring it in. I wouldn't bring in what I saw. But it did start out at the Chocolate Manure Factory.
Well, where does Kelsey Grammer fit into this? He's the name, isn't he?
He's the
The straight man, as it were.
straight man.
The straight
yeah,
man.
yeah,
The
yeah.
Gene Barry role.
Right.
Is that,
exactly.
Right. Michael, just sort of in the history of gay culture, is La Cage aux Folles have any edge anymore?
It didn't have edge when it opened in the 80s. But you know what? It was a controversial show when it did originally open, and it has opened a lot of hearts and minds to the idea that gays are people too. And with gay marriage being in the news.
These three being exceptions.
If they wear sequins.
Or
And I do.
hee-haw vests.
How
many?
Time to wrap it up.
All right, boys, we got to wrap it up. Very quickly, just give me a performance that you are really looking forward to, that you're excited about. Performer, actor.
Performer, I'll give you a play. Mark McDonough's Behanding in Spokane. I think anything by Mark McDonough is an event. It
And with
certainly is in
Christopher
Manchester.
Christopher Walken, that's going to be
And
a
Christopher
performance
Walken,
to
okay,
watch, yeah.
performance, but absolutely terrific. And I hope Orphan Cycle moves.
Okay, Michael?
I don't know if this will be good, but there's a show called Looped with Valerie Harper from Rhoda as Tallulah Bankhead doing looping for something. So you know she'll be boozing it up, high-stepping, and trying to do her voiceovers in between telling her life story. And I think it'll not run that long, but I'll be there. I'll be there.
Gay baby boomer time. There you go.
Yeah.
That's for you. Tallulah Bankhead. Oh, my God. And Jesse, could you give us something that's artistically significant?
Well, what Patrick said, I mean, I think that's probably going to be a great show, Behanding in Spokane. But also, there's a lot of stuff off-Broadway. I know we're not allowed to talk about off-Broadway because it doesn't exist. But there's a tremendous amount of what we end up seeing on Broadway later comes from there.
And what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to Mr. and Mrs. Fitch at Second Stage.
What's that about? Who's about?
It's about a married couple who are gossip columnists.
And it's by Douglas Carter Bean, who's booked on this show already to talk about
Well,
it.
And you love Xanadu, so why are you looking forward to this?
I read the script. It's hilarious. And there's a play that came from London called The Pride.
Yes, very good play.
That I'm highly looking forward to at Manhattan.
And what's that
Classic.
about?
The Pride is about two love triangles, one set in the 50s, one set now, but it's a little hard to describe. They both exist at the same moment in time somehow.
Ooh, sounds quite interesting.
It does.
All right, well, we'll keep our eye on that. All right, Jesse Green from New York Magazine, Michael Musto from The Village Voice with fork on the left, knife
in the back. You know it very well.
And Patrick Pacheco from London, and the LA Times and New York One on Stage. And we'll look forward to the movie, which is called
Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Waking Sleeping Beauty. Well, we'll have you on to talk about that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.